Tantor Audio, a division of Recorded Books, presents One Wedding and an Earl by Tracy Sumner, narrated by Siegerman. He's more of myself than I am. Whatever our souls are made of, his and mine are the same. Emily Bronte. Epiphanies. His, where a boy learns his father is a very cruel man indeed. Ollie's stomach tilted as the village constable dragged his brother down the winding drive leading from the estate. Xander Macaulay didn't struggle, didn't once glance toward his window. He wasn't going to forgive this transgression, not ever. Ollie had had one chance to have even a sliver of a family, and he'd ruined it, been too cowardly to speak up, and now it was too late. When he could no longer see the figures in the setting sun, Ollie swallowed his misery, his heart lodged in his throat. With an oath that shouldn't pass the lips of an 11-year-old boy, he cracked his forehead against the glass pane. His shoulder ached to the bone, dislocated a week ago, and popped back into place by the sibling he'd come to love this summer. A young man who thought Ollie had betrayed him. Oliver. His father preferred Oliver. He would never be Ollie again. Anger took him on a raging river, emotion he rarely allowed. His elevated position as the future Earl hammered into his brain long enough to keep him wary of every move he made. Before he took his next breath, he was striding down the corridor and into his father's study, the glossy walnut door that had kept him out since birth slapping against the wall. His father glanced up from the ledger spread across his desk, eyes exactly like his and Xander's, heating behind wire frames. Their shade was unusual, tarnished silver, nothing else like them in England. In the world, though Ollie hadn't yet seen much of that. Enough resemblance to declare Xander as his father's bastard, as incontrovertibly as a brand.
"Oliver!"
His father snapped his quill to the desk, a move that displayed the impatience his calm tone buried. His face was flushed, his hair unkempt, his clothing rumpled. The room reeked of brandy and sweat. Since his wife's death, the Earl did nothing in half measure, including slowly killing himself.
"You know not to interrupt when I'm working. The earldom doesn't run itself. I only pray you can pull your weight when the time comes. Not lose what the title stands for, as seems to happen with the younger set."
Ollie advanced until his knees, quivering but concealed by woolen trousers that were also good at concealing bruises from his father's temper, bumped the massive mahogany desk. A family treasure his great-grandfather had won in a horse race with the Duke of Manchester in 1788. He'd often imagined dying slumped atop it, the earldom swallowing him whole. "Xander didn't steal your pocket watch." The 5th Earl of Stanford bowed his head, his laugh dry and hard, pure contempt for the boy that would be the 6th flowing between them. Wrestling a cheroot from his waistcoat pocket, he took flint to tinder, set flame to tip.
"I know that silly lad. It was that imbecile footman, Alexander. Only brought him on as a favour to my solicitor. He's known the family since the Dark Ages, trying to get him off the savage city streets, bring him to the country."
He sucked in a breath and released a rank, filmy vapour into the air. It swirled about his head like the mist that enfolded the meadows surrounding the estate.
"He's suffering due punishment, then he'll be sent back to London to make his way as best he can. I've been charitable and found him a position as a chimney-sweep. You'd better be thankful that half-brother of yours has too hulking a frame to be a climbing boy, or that's what he would have got too."
Black dots swirled before Ollie's vision, his eyes pricking with tears. Xander's sentence was worse than this even. "If you knew he was innocent, then why? Why send your son away? Why let him think I betrayed his trust? He'll be returned to the workhouse, my lord, the workhouse!" Xander had told him tales of the place, haunting, horrible tales of beatings and gruel served with worm-ridden bread. Sickness and despair, such things a child should never see. He'd alleged that Ollie would never make it a month there, what with his feeble lungs and forgiving nature. Ollie wanted to argue, had even started to before shutting up, because he feared his brother was right. Xander Macaulay was anything but forgiving. His belligerence was one point in his favour. The tough survived in forbidding worlds, it seemed. The Earl braced his fists on the desk and rose, close enough to strike, a sufficient threat to have Ollie backing up a step.
"He's the child of a doxy I made the crude error of associating with in my youth. She was as beautiful as they come, and he has her look about him, I'll admit. That is my only excuse. He's nothing more to either of us, Oliver. Those damned eyes gave me little alternative but to recognize him. You have them too, curse it. This little gift tossed in my lap, a stolen timepiece, presented a satisfactory solution. No one expects me to house a common thief, a rookery rat, due to a trace of shared blood crawling through our veins."
He thumped his fist to the desk, 3 defining knocks.
"You'd best, and soon, my boy, forget him."
Ollie took a breath, a big stinking of smoke one. He kept himself from coughing by sheer will when his lungs were burning from the effort. He waged a fight with himself to steady his voice during these confrontations, to sound steady and sure, like Xander always did, not rasping and feeble. His lungs were weak, he was scrawny, but he was growing, getting stronger every day. Xander had said he would likely be as tall as he was some day. The moment Ollie could leave, he would. Find his brother, apologize, beg if he had to. He could send a note easily from Harrow, take a hack, and meet him in the city. It didn't have to be long. He was returning to school in less than a month. He'd repair this muddle, because no boy should grow up without his brother by his side. It was the best plan for both of them.
"I can see the wheels spinning, lad. Christ, if you don't have your mother's impotent tendency to let every emotion show on your face. It's a handsome face, however, so there is that. Spineless and unattractive would have been a trial to overcome."
He leaned until his fetid breath rushed past Ollie's cheek, until there was no whisper of sound aside from the wind shrieking against the fogged panes, the tick of a clock on the mantel signalling the end of his childhood.
"There'll be no more Harrow. I've let them know you aren't returning and have arranged for a local tutor. Derbyshire's best, I'm told, where I can keep a close watch on my ailing heir, an heir who crafted foolish notions about his bastard brother this summer and brought this conclusion down on his own head."
Ollie squeezed his eyes shut, blocking out the shimmer of delight rippling across his father's face. He was going to be sick all over this bloody desk that his father loved more than he loved his sons. Sinking into the armchair, he dropped his head to his hands. His lungs would not, at the moment, allow enough air to keep him standing. "You can't. You won't. You don't even like when I'm around. Send me away. Let me go."
"Ah, dear lad, you know I can. I will. I have. From now on, it's just you and me."
Hers. Where a girl learns the true meaning of the word alone. Necessity Byrne flicked the tattered curtain aside and glanced at the squalid lane where she'd spent her entire life. Shoreditch remained unaffected by calamity, while in this neat little abode the silence was deafening, the air dense with ripples of disease and death. She bit back a curse and the urge to smash every chipped dish in the dwelling upon the scuffed plank floor. Nothing had changed out there, when everything in this cosy nook that had once been her home was altered. The clomp of horse hooves on the pitted dirt path, shouts of vendors hawking fish and baked chestnuts. Carts, children, dogs, and rubbish littered about, the usual chaos in the slums. She nudged a stray flower petal with the toe of her tatty slipper. The vase on the table held 2 roses, one for each decade of her parents' marriage. Vibrant crimson last week, now wilted grey, like her future, unless she came up with a plan. Holding back tears, necessity patted her coat pocket and shot a glance at the rucksack at her feet. She had foodstuff for a week, if she rationed carefully. 50 shillings in the leather bag she'd taken from beneath her parents' straw mattress. Her mother's pearl ring, her father's pocket watch, items she suspected she'd have to sell at some point. It would kill her, but she was a rational girl who understood ugly things must happen to survive. Her sketchbook with notes on the herb garden she'd been planning to plant in the spring. A packet of lavender and rosemary seeds purchased at Spitalfields Market just 2 short weeks ago. She was proficient with medicinal properties of plants, a skilled gardener, a talent she hoped to turn into a business some day. She had plans and a blaze in her belly to accomplish them. Add desperation to the mix, having not a soul in the world to count on, and necessity had no choice but to succeed. She smoothed her hand down her coat, hitched up her trousers, her brother's clothing, as he'd no longer be needing them. Pressing her palm to the glass, the chill landed hard in her chest. The scent of her mother's perfume filtered through with her indrawn sigh. The aroma of roasted meat, an extravagance they couldn't often afford, but had managed recently to celebrate her brother Tom's birthday, lingered. Raucous laughter lived in this room. The image of Jane sprawled on the armchair by the fire, a book in her hands. Alfie drawing as he'd loved to do, his gap-toothed smile lighting up the space. These were lifeless remembrances now, faded and more so every day, like cloth sitting too long in the sun. Cholera had taken her family down like a scythe to wheat. One day standing, the next decimated, for reasons she couldn't understand, leaving only her standing. She hitched the rucksack on her shoulder and gazed about the tidy threadbare flat. One last glimpse, then her future beckoned. She had no option but to chase it. Even if she had the blunt to extend their lease another month, maybe 2, she couldn't stay. The building's owner, Mr. Santander, had made it quite clear he would help her. An adequate room on Anning Street at the bargain price of 10 shillings per month. His opinion, this adequacy, when she knew the building to be rat-infested and hideous. This filth in exchange for certain carryings-on he was able to describe in enough detail for necessity to understand she had to run. Growing up in the rookery, she'd seen things no young girl should have. Shadowy happenings in murky alley corners, acts in public house corners witnessed when she'd peeked inside as her mother tugged her past. Grunts and moans, lips parted to expel hard, harsh breaths. Clutching hands and bumping bodies. She knew what Santander wanted. It was whispered all over the district. He liked young girls. It's why her father had kept his daughters out of sight during his visits to collect rent. She shivered, squeezing her hand around the rucksack's leather strap. She wanted no part of this bedlam, did not understand why anyone would, unless forced. She closed the door behind her, pressed her brow to the scuffed wooden jamb, and wiped away the misery leaking from her eyes. She would leave the only home she'd ever known, and hope that someday she'd find the courage to love again, to have a family, to be happy. Theirs, Where an Earl and a Gardener Meet. Oliver Aspinwall, the newly disfigured Earl of Stanford, woke to find someone sitting by his borrowed bed. A female someone he'd never met. A domestic in the Duke of Leighton's household, Stanford instantly assessed. Ragged fingernails, a streak of dirt on her chin, her clothes the standard service issue black. Standard issue men's clothing. An overlong coat and trousers, a tattered cord for a belt, and a threadbare hat she'd pulled low to cover part of her brow. However, the gentle curves beneath the layers were anything but masculine. Also, she smelled faintly of nutmeg. He turned his head to get a better look because, even in the murky candlelight, something was splendid about the scene. He groaned as pain radiated across his cheek. His stitched skin itched like fucking mad. Christ, that drunken sot behind his brother's gaming hell had got him good.
"It's not as bad as it looks, sir. The sawbones did clean work. Scars make a man, and you're going to have a right flashy one. If you ever wish to appear rough round the edges, it's been granted," she whispered, and applied a cool cloth to his cheek. He lifted his hand to touch, but she stayed the movement. "Lucky for you he missed your eye. My ma was a healer of sorts, a midwife too. She treated various knifings, though your attacker used glass, which creates an angrier wound. Jagged. A dirty, rotten fighter is what you faced. I soaked this cloth in feverfew tea, you see. I had a wee garden in a ratty spot behind the workhouse, but the patch grew none the less, because I have the touch. The herb will help heal your skin if you use it, every day. I'll leave enough for a month. Alas, no addle-pated medical man is going to recommend it. Don't even think to ask. I knew they'd toss me out if I suggested it. I saw them bring you in."
She shrugged, as if this made perfect sense.
"So, here I am, sir."
"My lord,"
he murmured weakly, unsure why he'd think to correct someone coming to his aid. She was clever, her gaze narrowing. He had trouble looking away. Her eyes were an unusual shade, amber, like the last drop of whiskey at the bottom of a glass.
"My high in the instep lord, then,"
she said, and squeezed the rag into the bowl she held. But her touch was tender when it returned to him. She evidently wasn't one to hold a grudge.
"Marquis,"
he breathed through the pain.
"Earl."
"Why no laudanum, Earl? No bottles by your bedside?"
He shook his head as gingerly as he could without jarring his wound. "Can't."
"Ah."
She dipped the rag again, then pressed it gently to his face.
"Trouble with the opium dens. Happens to heaps of returning soldiers. Happens to lots, actually, where I come from. Passed out in the alleys, stepping over them like waste, stumbling out of flash houses. The world is often a depressing place."
He blinked, bringing her into sharp focus. Her face was ethereal, truly fetching beneath the grime.
"How much do you know about me?"
"Everything they print in those naughty broadsheets. We got 'em at the workhouse. Days old, stained and wrinkled from another's use, but serviceable. Latest rumour is you and that hulking bloke are related, the smuggling one who owns half of London. I believe it, you being brothers or cousins, perchance, after spying him pacing the hall outside this chamber for an hour, before he upped and left. He has sad eyes, and those eyes don't lie. Not another set like 'em that I've ever seen outside yours. The jig is up, should you have thought it wasn't."
He groaned, imagining Xander seeing him like this. She waved off his unease, sensing a delicate topic.
"Don't worry, my Lord Earl. I waited until after he left to come in. I know my medicinal intervention wouldn't be appreciated by the upper class, seeing as I'm assigned to the gardens. That daft major domo has shot cross stairs at me since I arrived."
Xander Macaulay isn't upper-class anything,
Stanford murmured, wondering vaguely if they'd given him laudanum, although he'd begged them not to. He felt woozy, and this grubby little urchin wasn't clearing up the picture, though she didn't smell nearly as filthy as she looked.
Who are you?
And he'd love to tell her that Leighton's majordomo was likely trying to determine how to tell her that her ruse of dressing as a man wasn't working. At all.
"Necessity Byrne of the Shoreditch, Burns. It's actually Josephine, but my pa called me his little Necessity, and it stuck. My mother called me Josie. She was educated, even had a governess of sorts when she was a babe. Her father was a cobbler of some import in Beaconsfield. We could read, and she didn't allow us to talk like we'd crawled from the gutter. Although my accent, however hard I've worked on improving it, is nothing like your fine vowels."
The Shoreditch Burns,
Stanford whispered, oddly charmed. Her Cockney was on the light side. With a little more polish, combined with that beautiful face, she could go far.
"All deceased. Cholera. Leaving me at 12 to manage on my own. Hence the workhouse. I survived by my skills with herbs, mostly, buying and selling from that squalid plot I was telling you about in the stews. I dressed as a lad for those years. I know you're wondering. Protection, if you get my meaning."
getting harder now, though, isn't it?
She glanced at her body with a faintly betrayed expression. "Quite." She'd rattled off her dismal history with impressive steadiness. Not one flicker of her eyelid or twitch of her hand. Her voice was as steady as if she'd been ordering bread from a shop down the way. He had a feeling this had taken lots of practice. She stood, giving him another shock. Tall and slender, coltish, if not for the delicacy of her features, those plump lips, the curve of her breast beneath her linen shirt, she might have been able to pass for a lad.
"I left the feverfew there."
She nodded to the bedside table.
"I'll be in the garden should you need more. I'll have a lovely herb patch by fall. Use it every day until the wound closes and the tenderness dissipates."
Stanford lifted to his elbow, staying her. His cheek throbbed in time to his heartbeat, but his curiosity about this chit was weightier than his distress. His desire not to be alone was even greater.
Xander Macaulay placed you here, working in the garden?
She halted at the door, whipped off her sad excuse for a hat, and spanked it against her thigh. Her hair rolled out like honey, a golden, unbound mass. Arousal swam to his toes and back, filling his chest with a fierce yearning he hadn't experienced in years.
"It was the lady he has eyes for who placed another lucky soul and me. Lady Philippa. I seen him look at her earlier. Hot as a brand. 1 second enough to know. She hasn't told anyone the apprentice gardener is a woman, even him. Or her brother, the Duke, Leighton. We're waiting to spring it on them until it's too late. I'm fortunate in the green, you understand. Anything I touch growing wild, so much promise they won't be able to let me go. My plan, my Lord Earl, is to become the most famed gardener in England."
She twisted her brim into submission with a smile that lit him to his toes.
"Next to Capability Brown, of course."
With that ludicrous declaration released to the universe, Necessity Byrne strolled from the Earl of Stanford's borrowed bedchamber with the grace of a rookery queen, leaving a scarred Earl transfixed. Chapter 1. Where a gardener locates a garden and an Earl in need. Derbyshire, 1828. Scars make the man. Necessity Byrne had told him this long ago, when she'd been brimming with youthful conceit, certain every word rang with her unadorned version of the truth, under the mistaken assumption that anyone would care to hear a bedraggled orphan's opinion, although she'd meant the scars located inside, not out. She wasn't sure this had been clearly communicated. As she stood on a gentle slope near the bottom of his side garden, a sprawling medieval fortress standing guard at her back, she wondered if he remembered her, because she remembered him. Oliver Aspinwall, Earl of Stanford, tormented war hero, ruffian, outcast, opium addict, owner of one of the oldest titles in existence, half-brother to an infamous smuggler, most eligible man in England, despite the scar tarnishing his otherwise handsome visage. Every duke in sight was married or near death, so a young, obtainable earl presented a grand promise indeed. Even one with a troubled past. Her hand clenched around her folio, the diagram of the earl's ramshackle gardens, incomplete but hopeful. Indeed, how could she forget him? The memory circled her mind. His eyes, a colour as rare as a ghost orchid, a spark of vibrancy in an otherwise bland world, an uncommon shade of grey, moonlight striking stone, ash upon brick, eyes unlike she'd ever seen aside from his half-brothers, a salient fact she'd recalled about the Earl when Xander Macaulay arranged for this assignment last month. Because this feature linked them, in society, for life, brothers, no one could argue. Her services were a gift, Macaulay had stated, a gift the Scarred Earl likely did not want. Necessity took off her bonnet and levelled her hand over her eyes to better see him. She wasn't one to turn away from a valuable opportunity. She had more guts than that. He would find out. Lord Stanford crossed the unkempt lawn of his Derbyshire estate, the tails of his shirt smacking his lean hips, arms more muscular than she remembered held rigidly by his side. A long, lanky silhouette moving toward her, features lost to shadow. The grey stone turrets of his home rising behind him, imposing and enchanting at once. His posture projected annoyance, his clothing indicated hard labour. Although she couldn't quite see his expression or those wondrous eyes, she visualized suitably a sketch in her mind, a vision that had never, frankly, left her. Masculine frustration she'd expected and was prepared to confront, experienced at confronting it. No one appreciated meddling older brothers or stubborn horticulturalists with formidable opinions. Her being sent to Aspinwall House to restore the grounds in extreme disorder was fraternal intrusion, and nothing but. Necessity had recognized this right off, even if she didn't understand the reasoning behind it. Family issues were the most complicated under the sun, and she didn't wish to insert herself into that conflict. Although if Xander Macaulay was going to hire someone to assist his half-brother in restoring what had once been the finest gardens in Derbyshire, she was the best landscape architect in England. She was. And no one could change her mind about believing this. During her brief conversation with the Earl 3 years ago, she'd been dressed as a lad, a bogus presentation Lord Stanford had immediately rejected. Her curves unfurling like a rose in bloom, betraying her as only nature could. She'd finally secured the position of her dreams as a gardener in training, working in the Duke of Leighton's household, her gifts with herbs bringing her to the injured Earl's bedside her first week in residence. His grievous wound obtained in a scuffle behind his brother's gaming hell, a drunken baron slicing his cheek with a shard of glass over funds lost that night. She'd gone to Lord Stanford's sick chamber without asking, because few appreciated the power of medicinal herbs, when feverfew was a known curative after all. The Duke of Leighton and his progressive Duchess had surprised her, keeping her on once her...
Sample complete. Ready to continue?